Hello, and welcome to the session on why you, yes you, should post on the EA forum with Aaron Gertler. My name is Melinda Wang, and I'll be your MC for this session. It's a pleasure to host for you guys. First, who is Aaron? In his work at the Center for Effective Altruism, Aaron runs the non-technical aspects of the EA forum, writes the EA newsletter, and advises members of the EA community on content production. In his spare time, he advises a small private foundation and is a semi-professional video game streamer. First, we'll start with a 15-minute pre-recorded talk by Aaron, which will be followed by a live Q&A session. As you guys are probably already familiar with the drill by now, you can post your questions on the chat box on the right-hand side of this video, either in your own name or anonymously, and you can also upvote for the questions that you like to push them higher up the queue. And we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. And Aaron actually also has a special surprise for us at the end, in which we'll be brainstorming for a particular exercise, and hopefully to get you guys to be more motivated to post on the EA forum. And now I'll pass the torch on to Aaron.
Hello, EA Global. Always wanted to say that, and now I have. My name is Aaron Gertler, and I'm here to talk to you today about why you, yes, you, should publish a post on the EA forum. All right, let's get into it. All right, on with the presentation. So, before we get into things, I'd like to talk a little bit about the nature of this presentation and the kind of message that I'm giving you. I would call this an honest sales pitch. I work for the Center for Effective Altruism. I help to run the EA forum. And while I do really think it's an excellent website, and I do think that your participation is only going to make it better, I'm also trying to persuade you at the same time as I'm informing you. So now you know, but I do really believe everything I'm saying. As for what an epistemic status is, if you haven't heard that phrase before, we'll get into it a bit later. So what is the EA forum? I'm not going to talk about what an online forum is, you probably know that, but why does effective altruism, why does the EA community have one of those just for itself? So as a community, we are a little unusual in some ways. We share some common principles, certainly. We have a belief in trying to do the most good we can, using scientific reasoning while being honest and transparent and upholding certain other moral values. But as far as what it means to do the most good, what causes we ought to prioritize, what approaches we should take to working on those causes, there's a lot we don't agree on. You'll probably hear from a bunch of people at EA Global who, in fact, represent a lot of those different approaches and work on a bunch of different problems. So what binds us together as a community? Well, it's that we can learn from each other, and it's that we can work together to make progress on some of these problems that we think are really important and which are really challenging to work on. So it helps to have as many minds as possible. And the EA forum is where people from the community come together to work on this stuff. Pretty simple, straightforward. It's also a place that's sort of the central location for discussion. So if there's any place where the EA community needs to come together to have one conversation, the EA forum is the most likely place for that to happen. And if you have an idea that you want the community to hear, the forum's the best place to publish it. So that's the basic purpose of the forum. We're all working together here to try and make progress on important problems. But what can you do with a forum post? What are some of the things that can happen after you publish a forum post? What's the value of doing this? To illustrate this, I'm going to talk about some posts that I really liked over my time at CEA and sort of what was accomplished through those posts. First one I'd like to talk about is information security careers for global catastrophic risk reduction. So one of the main purposes of EA Global is to try and figure out what important questions you can answer to help you figure out what you ought to be doing with your life. And Claire Zabel and Luke Mulhauser had an argument that more EAs should be considering careers in information security. As a result of their publishing this, and this is just results that I personally know about from talking to a couple of people who read the post and were deeply influenced by it, at least 2 people decided to actually try changing their careers. One person was working as an engineer at Google and decided to take a 6-month internal rotation to work on the information security team, something that otherwise he wouldn't have done, so spend at least 1,000 hours checking out this career path. Another person just decided to quit his job entirely and start studying up on the subject of information security and is now applying for full-time jobs in this field, and who knows, might spend tens of thousands of hours working on this. And all of this work was caused by a convincing post that took Claire and Luke, I don't know, 12 hours to write. So that's a ton of leverage because they were able to make a persuasive case that convinced some EA readers. And it's something you don't have to be an open philanthropy researcher to pull off the way that Luke and Claire were. You can also just make an argument. And I've seen a lot of posts on the EA forum convince people to spend a lot of time and resources working on something because the post was convincing. Something else you can do if you're not trying to convince people to take a certain path in life, maybe, is you can start a conversation. An example post that I like that does this is Growth in the Case Against Randomized Development by Hauke Hillebrandt and John Halstead. This is a post that basically argues that effective altruism should place a bit of a higher priority on studying economic growth, how to make it happen, what the effects of it really are, what tends to cause it, because they think this has the potential to improve the lives of many, many people in low and middle income countries. And they thought maybe we should be spending relatively more time on this and relatively less on RCTs compared to where we are now. This argument was really interesting to a lot of people. It took a topic that had been discussed kind of in the outer academic world and really brought it to EA in a big way, caused a lot of people to have opinions and thoughts they hadn't had before. And they got feedback from a bunch of expert researchers. And I've just listed 2 examples of this here. We've got Cindy Lee from ID Insight and Alexander Berger from Open Philanthropy. These are tiny excerpts of the comments they left. The comments themselves were much, much longer, would fill multiple slides by themselves. But the point is that these people who knew a lot about the subject decided to ask questions to John and Hauke and to propose maybe new directions they could explore in, give other kinds of feedback. And John and Hauke were able to respond. So we had this open conversation on the forum between a lot of people who knew a lot about these topics. And there were 150 plus comments on this thing, many of which were equally informative. So we got to have this really long, dense, detailed conversation, make a lot of progress, and all that started because 2 people decided to post an idea on the EA forum. And this kind of thing happens all the time. Another example of a conversation that was started that I think was really important, of a different nature, was this post. After 1 year applying for EA jobs, it is really, really hard to get hired by an EA organization. An anonymous poster decided to write about their experience applying to a bunch of jobs and not getting any of them, which was a really frustrating time. And they wanted to talk about some of the messaging that happens in effective altruism around career choice, or the messaging that they perceived at the time. This post led to a lot of people having thoughts on it. A lot of comments were written where people shared their own experiences going through the EA hiring process or being on the other side and trying to do hiring and how difficult that can be sometimes. And as a direct result of this post, a bunch of different organizations decided to think hard about how they hired. I, in fact, used this post as a resource when I was doing some hiring for a contractor for CA not too long ago. And this is like a really sensitive topic. It's the kind of thing that often doesn't get brought up. And it's really good that someone felt comfortable enough to post this on the forum and that a discussion ensued and that a lot of just reading these comments was a huge education for me and like what it is like for lots of people to go through this experience that I, as one person, had only gone through once. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you're interested in EA career stuff. And this is in fact the highest carbon post in the history of the EA forum. It's a little number on the right there. So that was another conversation that started. But something else you can do, and if you don't have a big idea or a message you'd like to spread to the whole community, is you can just ask a question. The screenshot just shows some of the top questions in terms of like carbon activity that have happened on the forum in the last year or so. But your question doesn't have to be especially deep or profound. You can just, it can be something pretty basic. Let's say that you think you could maybe find the answer to a question with an hour of research, but it would take you 5 minutes to post a question on the EA forum, and it might take somebody who knows a lot about the topic 5 or 10 minutes to give you an answer. Then it's definitely a good case for publishing the question, not only because we're saving time as a community, we like to cooperate in that way, but also because if anybody else has a question like you had, and they decide to look for an answer in the forum, if you've posted your question, now they can learn from whoever answered your question. The more information gets put onto the forum, the easier it is for people to pick it up later. So everything on the forum, the simplest conversation, has the potential to add a lot of value in that way. So asking questions is great. Here's an example of somebody who asked a question and actually got a really useful answer. So Simon Panrucker, worked at Cartoon Network, was a songwriter and had a lot of puppet skills, an unusual skill set, but he was really dedicated to effective altruism, wanted to figure out a way to use his skills for good, and decided to ask about it on the forum. And somebody suggested that he reach out to some EA orgs to see if they wanted creative projects done. He did. And as a result, a year later, we got this other post you can see on the lower right. He wound up working with The Life You Can Save to produce an EA mini musical with a bunch of puppets. I mean, who knew that was going to happen? He did, no one else did, but it turns out that his skills and another organization's needs were a good fit, and this connection probably would have happened unless he had asked this question on the EA forum. In addition to asking questions, you can also answer them. So if you have a lot of knowledge about a given topic, I strongly recommend that you consider holding an Ask Me Anything session. So you can see a list of some of the Ask Me Anything sessions that the forum has had over time. A lot of people from EA orgs have done them, but you don't need to work at an EA org to run one. You just have to have knowledge that you think other people might be interested in. And you can actually see an example of this from Evan Gainsbauer, who decided to run an Ask Me Anything session based on the fact that he owned an expensive textbook about a topic he thought would be of interest to the EA community. And in fact, it was interesting. A bunch of people asked questions. They got good answers. It was a neat little post. And it didn't require like deep expertise. It was just, he had a textbook that he'd read. So if you have knowledge about something that you think is relevant to the community, consider sharing it this way. That's why you don't have to figure out what the most important thing you can write is. You can just let other people ask you questions, and so you know that what you're writing is going to reach people who are interested in it. So those are a few different use cases for the forum. There are a lot of other types of posts you can write. I definitely didn't cover the full spectrum of stuff here, but I'd now like to get into some tips for actually writing good posts. How can you get into writing posts in the first place? So first bit of advice is pretty commonplace. Write what you know. If you're at this conference, I've made this point before, you probably know about something relevant to the EA community. Or maybe you don't have a lot of knowledge yet. Maybe you're a student. Maybe you're just getting started with something, but maybe you're eventually going to learn something that will be of use to the community. Maybe you're in the process of learning that right now. Maybe you're reading an interesting book. Maybe you're working on a thesis or some other long paper. And once that's done, there's probably a post in that somewhere. And even if that's not the case, remember, you can still get a lot of value into the community by just asking your questions, getting them answered, and then there's more knowledge available for the next person who has the same question you did. So if you're watching this, there's probably something you can contribute using the knowledge or the questions you have to the forum. You can also post about anything. It doesn't just have to be the thing you're an expert in. An example of what I mean by that is the Fish Welfare Initiative. A couple of people from that organization recently did a hiring round, hired a couple of people, and decided to write about the experience of hiring. So it was a post that wasn't about fish welfare at all. Any organization theoretically could have written it. And it just discussed the process they went through, the wording they used in the job ad, the various documents and tests that they sent to applicants, the stats on who applied and from where, and some things they learned during the process and things they would do differently next time. It was this really dense, info-packed post. I found it really useful reading. I've actually shared it with a few people since it was published not too long ago. And all they had to do was go through a hiring process and keep an eye on what they were doing and then write about it later. It was just one experience, and it turned into a really useful resource. So consider that even if it's not the thing you're the most expert on, if you've had an experience that you think might have some relevance to people in the community, write about it. It's in the title of the presentation. This is a poem I wrote that I think sums up the same point. When I look at your profiles in grip, I am haunted by the shadows of posts unwritten. That's a picture of Edgar Allan Poe, but it could also be a picture of what you're going to look like writing a post for the EA forum. If you do write a post longhand, you can mail it to me. I promise I'll type it up for you. That would just tickle me pink. Anyway, moving on. Another piece of advice I have is to work your way up. So maybe you don't start with writing a full-fledged post. Maybe you start with some comments. And those comments don't even have to be like super brilliant or profound to be useful. It can be something as simple as, here's a question I have. I'm not sure what you mean by this. Can you explain? And again, if somebody else had the same question, now you're helping them get that question answered. And you're also helping the author clarify their point, which is great. Or maybe all you have to say is, hey, thanks. I like this post. I found it valuable. I learned something from it. And that's the kind of thing that can really make an author's whole day. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of a compliment like that, you probably know what I mean. If you want to write something, but maybe you're a little bit nervous about hitting the publish button, maybe nervous about having it be on the homepage of the forum, visible to everybody, you can just try a short form post. Those are still visible to everyone, but they're kind of tucked away on a personal page you have, a little harder to find. And a short form is basically a special post format, which is designed for brief and quickly written posts. So it's our way of saying, hey, it's okay to have a rough idea, a speculative idea, an uncertain idea. It's okay to have something you want to write that's like 2 sentences long. You can just make it into a short form post. And this feature exists in the forum because a lot of people feel this way about writing online. You're not alone in being a little bit hesitant to publish a rough idea. But hey, that's what short form's for. Here are a few examples of short form posts. So we've got just people sharing links, people saying, hey, this book is available online now. You can get it. You can read it if you want to. Just sharing little tidbits of useful information without having to do a whole post out of it. A couple more examples, which serve to illustrate what I meant by epistemic status earlier. So epistemic status is this other neat little thing you can do if you're nervous about publishing something. It's a way you can, at the beginning of a piece, just say, hey, here's what's going on in this piece. I'm really uncertain about this, or I feel like I'm kind of biased here, and I'm going to just admit my bias rather than trying to correct for in the writing, just so you know what's going on. Or, hey, this is like really rough and unpolished. I know it's rough and unpolished. I might fix it later. I might not. Basically, all of this is totally fine. But it's nice if you can say, like, hey, I recognize this. So this is what you're in for, reader. Here's what you're going to find. You can see a couple of great examples of this. Will Bradshaw, really serious, devoted researcher, had some thoughts on a topic, realized that they were pretty speculative and not super polished, and was just like, sure, here they are. Take them as they are. And then we've got Michael Aird, who read a paper and decided to write this brilliant epistemic status. Unimportant hot take on a paper I've only skimmed. So if you have any unimportant hot takes on papers that you've only skimmed, consider posting them on the short form as short form posts. And the last piece of advice I have is ask for help. You don't have to write a forum post by yourself. There are a lot of people you can get feedback from. One of them is me. I offer feedback on forum posts. You can see the Google Doc that I've shared with you all for more details on that and how to get my help. There's also a Facebook group, Effective Altruism Editing and Review, where you can get feedback from a bunch of different people in the community. And of course, you can also see the comment section as another form of help. Once you publish a post, it's not like you're printing it out in a newspaper. It's not like you're submitting it for a grade to a professor or giving it to your boss as like this final piece of polished, finished work. It's a piece of writing on the internet. You can edit it. You can change it. You can take feedback and use that to make the post better. In fact, we strongly encourage people to do that. Like you should think of publishing as like, maybe it's the first step, but maybe it's not the last step. Maybe there's more improvements that can be made to the post. An example of this that I really like is by Hauke Hillebrand. Global development interventions are generally more effective than climate change interventions. So this was not the original title of the post. You can see that a little updated there. The original title of the post was exactly the reverse. Previous title, climate change interventions are generally more effective than global development interventions. But someone in the comments decided to say, hey, I think the math here is off, and pointed out an error, what turned out to be an error. And then Hauke basically rewrote the post and changed the title. And it was all because a comment came along that helped to correct the post and make it much more useful, because now it's probably more accurate. And you can see here an epistemic status that Hauke posted, and also some acknowledgments for the folks who help with comments. So again, when you're writing a post, you're not alone. There are a lot of ways to get help. Consider using them. So you'll see all this summed up on the Google Doc that you have. But meanwhile, let's get into the next stage of the session here. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. You're going to find a list of possible writing prompts for generating ideas for forum posts in the Google Doc that's been shared with all of you. What we're going to do next is there will be a short Q&A session for people to ask questions if they want to. We'll follow that up with some brainstorming time for you all to think of ideas. And then if we have time near the end, I might talk with one or two people in the audience about ideas they've had and give some feedback based on what I think could help them make the post they're thinking about writing more useful, the version of their idea that might be most valuable to write about, things like that. But for now, let's move on to questions and answers. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you for that talk, Aaron. So let's get started with our first question. Posted by Mr. Anonymous. I'm sure a lot of people probably echo this sentiment. But Mr. Anonymous, or Miss Anonymous, I'm sorry for not being gender neutral, said, it took me about 4 years of engagement in EA to find enough courage to post on the forum. How should we make it less intimidating to post on the forum?
Yeah, this is a question I think about a lot. I think first, thank you for eventually posting on the forum. It's great to have you. I don't know who you are, but it's very likely that I appreciated your post, since I appreciate almost all the stuff people post there. I think we've been trying to do a few things to make posting less intimidating. Something that I referred to in the talk was the short form post format, which we developed specifically for this use case, I guess, of people who maybe want to post but feel intimidated about it. A short form post really is kind of our official way of broadcasting, hey, this is like just a scrap of an idea I had. I'm not confident in it. I don't think it's like this great earth-shaking idea, but I just like have a thought and I'm going to post it. And the short form post can, I think, I would highly encourage you to just like, if you're worried or nervous about posting something, just consider making it a short form. Consider just like posting like the bare minimum version of the idea, the MVP, minimum viable post. And then maybe you'll get comments that'll encourage you to expand on something in there. Something else I do is offer free editing and feedback to anybody who wants it on forum posts. You can find more information on how to do that in the document linked in the event description. So if you have a post, but you're intimidated to post it, or even just like an idea, it doesn't have to be a full draft, feel free to just write to me. I'm happy to give you feedback, or direct you to somebody who's maybe an expert on your topic who can give you better feedback than I can. I really do think that also the forum is a pretty positive culture. I will not say that every comment is positive. There are certainly people who are critical of things, and certainly there are comments that I wish had been written in a kinder tone that I see sometimes. But I think compared to almost anywhere else you could post your ideas on the internet, you're likely to get, I think, good substantive feedback on the forum. And I think if you actually like look at comments on a lot of the posts that are there, hopefully you'll see examples of that. Of course, I'm a little biased since I'm like very comfortable in this space. I don't want to discount anyone's feelings of intimidation, because I'm, I think, fortunate enough to be in a position where I can feel pretty confident posting now. But I will say that if there's anything that I personally can do to help you, please do write to me. There's also the Effective Altruism Editing Facebook group, which I've linked in that same document, where you can get feedback and thoughts from lots of people on Facebook before you put them on the forum, which might feel like a safer space for some people. But it's still something we're working on. I'd welcome any suggestions.
Great. So I think some people's motivational states are definitely aligned with what you're suggesting, but at the same time, I guess this factor of relevance really comes into play. For example, how much effort should we make in researching whether or not the topic that we want to post has been posted in the past already? And how much should we ensure that it doesn't look like it's coming from a newbie?
I'll answer this in reverse order. So I would say you don't need to hide your newbie status. I think the way you're most likely to get a useful answer is if you're very clear on like how much you know about a topic and what your background is coming in. And if the thing is like you really haven't done much research and you don't know much, that's totally okay. Like the forum is not a place that's meant, I think the forum's supposed to kind of have higher standards in the sense that it's good to like ask a question thoughtfully and try to ask it in such a way that it's like relatively easier for someone to give you an answer to the question you're asking. So like, what's the best charity to donate to maybe is like not the ideal question because it's really broad, right? It's like really hard for someone to write a good answer to that question. But if you say, for example, hey, I'm really interested in like the developing world medicine space, like what are some good charities in that area? Or I'm really interested in animals, what are some resources I can use to find good animal charities to donate to? If you're like a little more specific, that makes it easier to answer questions. As far as like trying to do research to figure out if your question's been asked before, I would say minimal. Like you can search using the forum search bar for terms that seem relevant to what you're asking about. But if you don't find something pretty quickly, I would say A, it's safe to assume that it probably hasn't been asked in the same way before. B, if it has been asked in the same way before, trust the people who have read the forum for a long time and are familiar with the post there. They can let you know, hey, this has been asked kind of before. Here's some answers to your question. And that just means that they've been able to give you a helpful resource. It's not a bad thing to ask questions been asked before because that's how people can connect you with the resource you're looking for, which might just be answers to a previous version of that question. Also, EA is changing all the time. Even if you ask a question that someone else asked 3 years ago, the answers to your question might look very different today than they did 3 years ago. So please don't feel shy about asking repeat questions because there's a lot of new value to be generated. A, because maybe the answers are different. B, maybe different people see your post and then they can provide answers when maybe 3 years ago the people using the forum are different and that person got different answers as a result.
So I suppose in a way that sort of redirection is really similar from what you would see in other websites like Reddit. So how should we structure, I guess, our understanding of posting on EA forum? How should we like parallel those with parallel posting on EA forum with like posting on other forums like Reddit?
So yeah, you can compare the forum to a lot of different websites. I've seen people compare it to Reddit. I've seen people compare it to Facebook. And it would take too long, I think, to get into like lots of technical descriptions of how the forum compares different things. I think the overarching thought I have here is we kind of need like a central place that we all kind of agree is the place to post. Like it seems really healthy for the community if discussion is more concentrated in one space as opposed to spread really evenly across a bunch of different places, such that it's really hard to keep up with conversation. And sort of what I can say about the forum is going to be, it's run by people who are interested in effective altruism and have like a specific ear to the community's interests, where it's pretty hard to get Reddit to maybe accept changes that you suggest to Reddit unless you like know them personally or something. Also, I say the forum does have some features that maybe make it a little bit more. Yeah, actually, I probably won't get into the technical points here. I think it would take a little too long. I will say the forum is sort of designed for the community, run by people in the community, and as a result, it's probably just going to be more flexible to the community's needs and desires going forward. It does have a much smaller tech team than Reddit, but at the same time, you can actually talk to us. You can like write directly to a programmer at CEA. If you go to our team page on centerforeffectivealtruism.org, you can just say, write to JP and say, hey, JP, I have a suggestion for the forum. Or you can write to me about it, and I can bother JP about it myself. He has to listen to me. Sorry, JP. But anyway, I think it's built for the community, by the community, which sounds like a really cheesy line that just came out of my mouth. Sorry. But I think that's like a compelling reason to try using the forum over some of these other platforms for most purposes. Obviously, there are reasons to use Reddit over the forum for certain things. If you're like a big Reddit user and Reddit is part of your daily routine, and it'd be pretty hard to like add another website to that routine, by all means, use Reddit. If you want to hear from your friends about an EA topic, use Facebook, because that's where your friends are. I think the forum is like a pretty good candidate for like where it would be good to center a lot of people if we really want to have one space where you can kind of reliably broadcast something to the whole EA community if you want to.
Yeah, I think that point segues to our next question pretty well. In that, what do you think the role of the forum is compared to EA Facebook groups, for example? The short form posts seem pretty similar to the FB groups.
Yeah, so one big advantage of Facebook is that Facebook can have split up groups by topic in a way that's kind of harder for the forum. People have suggested trying to split the forum into a bunch of subforums, and it doesn't seem like that's likely to happen anytime soon for reasons I won't get into now. But if you're interested just in animal causes, there are probably 10 different animal-specific EA Facebook groups that you could go join right now. You're only getting notifications from those. You're only going to have conversations about animal stuff, and that seems like a really good use case for Facebook. A problem with Facebook, well, there are a couple problems with Facebook. Number one is that a lot of people don't like being there for a variety of reasons. There are issues with how posts are archived. It's not super searchable. It's full of distracting notifications that might pull you away from EA conversations into other kinds of things. People often try to limit their Facebook use for very sensible reasons, because just Facebook is this kind of all-purpose platform that kind of shoves itself in your face whenever you visit. Actually, Zvi Moshowitz on the blog, Don't Worry About the Base, has written some good posts where he outlines what he believes to be flaws with Facebook as far as group discussions are concerned. So if you search for like, Don't Worry About the Base Facebook, you'll probably find some posts that make these arguments more eloquently than I could. That said, I think for the use case of like, you want to talk to your friends about EA, or you're interested in this one or two specific cause areas, or I want to reach a lot of people with this question, and I'm going to go to the Facebook group that has 20,000 people in it, as opposed to the EA forum, or maybe both. Like Facebook does have just a different audience in the forum. So if you want to spread our messages as widely as possible, you'd probably use both. I think they're good use cases, but I still think the forum is probably the best place to have a substantive conversation. I think karma helps. I think just having a message that goes out reliably to the whole community of people who check the forum is good. And I think it's also much more searchable, archivable, easier to like find old posts and share them. All that stuff goes well.
Mm-hmm. And how would you recommend posting articles that are cross-posted from like a personal blog, for example, that are particularly geared towards like a general and an EA audience?
I think probably the best approach is, I'd say rather than editing the whole article, the longer it is, the harder that seems to be, you might just want to cross-post it and leave a couple of notes at the top that are more forum-specific. For example, you could say like, here's a summary of the points I make here that I think will be novel to people in the forum. Let's say you have a post that's like 50% information that almost any forum user will know. It's just like general EA stuff. And then 50% more specific information that you think people in the forum won't know. Maybe at the top of your post, you just have like a 3-bullet summary that's like, here's the info that you probably didn't know yet. You can read the full post if you want to see it in context, but if you just want the short version, here it is. Something else you can do to have questions that are specific to a forum audience. This is something I encourage people to do generally on their posts. If you have questions you'd like your readers to answer, try leaving them in comments underneath of the post. That way someone can read your post, skim it over quickly, but then get right to like, oh, I see this is Aaron Hamlin's question. What is Aaron asking me? Like, what does Aaron want from me, an EA forum user, to respond to regarding this post? So I'd say rather than editing the whole thing, it's okay just to post it, trust people to read the bits they're interested in, and maybe add a summary that'll be especially useful to forum users. You can also write to me with questions about this. My advice might differ on a post-by-post basis.
Great. So it seems like in encouraging people to post, you may also be promoting this mindset of just publish and let others decide if it's valuable. And what are the downsides to that?
So downsides to this, sometimes if there's this point where like the idea for like having to just publish others decide is to like have the forum be less intimidating, trust the community's filters, just have more content come in, and then hopefully we like have a broader and more diverse reach to a bunch of people who have a lot of different ideas. This can be problematic if, for example, the forum is like, if the forum gets to the point where it's 20 or 30 posts a day as opposed to being 3 to 5 posts a day, maybe suddenly it gets like really hard to read everything and you really wish that people were spending more time editing their stuff before it goes in. Right now, I think it's really pretty easy to keep up with almost all the content posted on the forum if you're really interested in doing that, or to keep up with all the forum content around a specific topic if you want to. But if we got like a much higher input of posts, maybe I would suddenly lean back away from the idea of everybody posts everything and maybe more toward let's filter a bit more. Another problem could just be that if you're just publishing and there are ideas that could be somewhat risky, like you're going to post some really controversial idea and you're going to throw it out there without talking to anybody, maybe you end up causing a lot of drama that could have been avoided if you talked to a couple of people beforehand. Or maybe you post something that has an info hazard or something, and that could have also been avoided if you talked to a couple of people beforehand. I will say I don't recommend necessarily just like throwing up the first draft of your idea. I will say that like it can be really healthy to run it by a person or two, whether it's me, whether it's a friend, whether it's the EA editing Facebook group that I've linked in that document. But for now, I do think it's valuable as long as you can get like a little bit of feedback on it, whatever you think might be especially risky. I still think we're at the point where there's not nearly as much content as I would like to have in the community to kind of maximize your intellectual progress output. I would love to see more posts still.
So speaking of feedbacks, Michelle asked, how would you prefer to be contacted for editing/feedback?
Yeah, so I linked to a post in the document attached to the event description. And that post is, I think, just called Editing Available for EA Forum Posts. Something like that should be pretty easy to find on the forum. And that gives all the instructions you'll need for how to contact me most productively. That said, you're also welcome to just like email me cold. You don't need to worry about following a perfect 5-step process. If it makes it easier for you to get in touch with me, just to like use whatever format you prefer, please do that. I don't want to burden you unduly if you're already doing all the work of producing a forum post.
And there's some stylistic issues that people are wondering. So Jesse asked, I worry that using very formal language like epistemic status as opposed to confidence level makes for a higher barrier to entry. Is this formality worth it?
Yeah, this is an ongoing debate in many sections of the community about how much jargon do we really need to use, how much we try to avoid jargon. I think the pro-jargon point that you could make is that it kind of helps to bind a community together if you have kind of these like little linguistic things that people pick up on. Maybe it also helps people communicate concepts more accurately. So when I look at, for example, confidence level versus epistemic status, I think confidence level gets at some of the things that epistemic status allows for, but in some ways epistemic status is a bit more flexible. Like you can say, like, I don't know how confident I am in this. I'm just sharing it without any opinions, for example. That can be your epistemic status. Or like if I had to put a confidence level on the presentation that I gave just now, like confidence level, like this is a sales pitch wouldn't make any sense. Like there's sort of like a word or a phrase that kind of describes, I'm going to give you general information about the tenor of this piece of content. I do think on the anti-jargon side, it is much more welcoming if words used in the community tend to be less kind of jargony and more like have clear meanings to people who aren't familiar with them. I don't have like great general ideas about how to fight this trade-off overall. I do think epistemic status seems like flexible enough and useful enough that it's a piece of jargon I would endorse. I think there are lots of other pieces of jargon that I wish people would do away with. But I won't get into that now. That seems like a good way to make a lot of enemies quickly. But I do think that, yeah, if people please do push against jargon, if you notice people using a phrase in the forum and you think there's a phrase they could have used that's easier to understand, point that out. I've seen really good comments that actually have done that, that have said, hey, I feel like you could have said this and it would have been a little easier to understand. That I think is really valuable feedback for authors, especially authors who are trying to reach a broader audience with their work.
Mm-hmm. And along similar lines, someone asked, do you think that changing the aesthetic of the forum in a certain way may help make it more approachable?
I mean, I think the level one answer to that is just, yeah, I could imagine that there's some optimal version of the forum that would make it as engagement friendly as possible. And I highly doubt that we've accidentally stumbled across that optimal version of the forum. I think there are a lot of different ways you could change the aesthetic in different directions that would make it appealing to different groups of people. And I don't really know what that would look like. It's unfortunately kind of a hard thing to test. Like mocking up wholly different looking versions of the forum for like A/B testing is tricky to do with like live users with a live website. If you have an idea for like how the forum's aesthetics could be better, post about it on the forum, or email me, and I'm happy to kind of give feedback on those ideas. I think we've definitely had good suggestions that have made the forum better over time, and we're always adding new features. And I would love to hear ideas about how the forum could be made more visually friendly. I will admit that right now the aesthetic is like a little bit on the colder and more austere side, with everything kind of being big patches of white space with black letters. And maybe there are ways it could be made more colorful and Facebookish without completely tilting in the other direction. But I think every design change is going to come with trade-offs, and I'd be really curious to hear more specific suggestions from people.
Great. Someone asked, newbie here, would it be beneficial to try to share EA forum posts far and wide in non-EA circles, or try to broaden EA's appeal? Or is the forum the wrong vehicle?
So it depends on the post. I think there are some forum posts that are really well written for a wide audience. So I am kind of the lead writer on the Effective Altruism newsletter. It's one of my roles at CEA. And that means I have to choose things to share with an audience of up to 50,000 people who might read the newsletter in any given month. Realistically, more like 15,000 people actually open it. But anyway, so I try to pick carefully posts I think have some value to a broad audience and share those. And I think the forum routinely generates those. I also think there are forum posts that will make almost no sense to anyone you try to share them with unless they have a lot of context, and that I wouldn't recommend sharing. It just sort of depends on the post. And if there's a specific post you're thinking of sharing with a wide group of people, I'd be happy to try and give feedback on that point. Or you could even kind of write to the author and say, hey, would you mind if I share this with a large audience? Is there any way you'd want to change it if it were to be shared with a large audience? I think for every piece of content, it's going to be different. And having a conversation with the person who's kind of responsible for writing the piece of content might be a good way to go about it if you're not sure. And you can always message them on the forum by just clicking on their username.
Great. I actually have a general question about usability. So for someone whose, I guess, first language is not English or whose native language is not English, how should someone approach posting? And are there like sub-forums for those who want to discuss certain issues in other languages?
I will say right now the forum is basically just English language at the moment. I think that's sort of a decision made by the kind of lingua franca of the EA community largely being English right now for the moment. And it kind of being, I think, trickier to use the forum if you have a lot of posts that most people who use the forum just won't be able to understand or respond to very well. So that's like a tough question. That's something that I hope can change over time. I think one of the biggest changes that I'm excited to see come to EA is a lot more EA content in other languages and EA discussion happening for people who are not super fluent in English. I will say there are a lot of people who post in the forum who are not fluent in English and still write really good content. And I think I would highly discourage like worrying about every little aspect of grammar or wording. I think as long as your idea can be understood by people, I like to think that the forum, especially given that EA is a pretty global community, that people can overlook, small grammatical things and focus on your ideas. This is also the kind of help that the editing Facebook group or that me through my feedback that I can give you. I certainly worked with people for whom English was not their first language and helped them to try and, fix whatever might have been especially confusing in posts that they were writing. That's something I'm happy to help with. But I will admit that it's a tough position, and I respect that. I guess I especially respect anybody who's willing to try and work on work from having English as a second language and posting in a place like the forum where it's like really complex writing sometimes. I respect you, and I hope that I can help you make your ideas heard for more people.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Another question, I think this really gets to the problem representation of EA in the wider society. So are critiques or reports of harm in the EA community welcome on the forum, or should we limit posts to make EA look good?
I think critiques are really welcome on the forum. You can see that one of the posts I linked to in my presentation was essentially somebody kind of critiquing at length how the EA community is in general handled hiring and job applications and the whole application process for people. I think some of the best forum posts of all time have been critiques, whether of EA in general or especially of specific organizations. There have been cases where people were running projects that seemed like they had like really negative impacts, and the fact that they were called on the forum was like a big part in helping the projects either improve or putting an end to the projects in some cases. Another post I can think of is Sanjay's post, Why Cool Earth is Overrated. I forget the exact title of the post, but it was basically a critique of this charity that sort of was pretty popular as an environmental charity, but I think it was like a pretty strong critique and opened up this really good conversation that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I think critiques are great. Reports of harm on the forum are trickier. I think because the forum is generally not the place that's going to help you resolve the harmful situation as fast as possible. My recommendation, if you want to report harm in the community, would be to talk to Julia Wise and Sky Mayhew, who are CEA's kind of contact people for the EA community about this first. They can help you figure out what the best next steps are. But I think usually it's going to be better to try and work with people who are going to help you directly resolve the problem and who are experts in doing that, rather than submitting something to the forum at large. That would be my first impression of what to do. But I'm not an expert on this. The people who are the experts on this are Julia and Sky. And so I'd recommend asking them questions about this if there is a situation you'd like to report. But critiques are extremely welcome. We have, in fact, multiple tags in the forum that are only used for posts that are critical of the EA community or organizations within it. So if you want to look at the criticism EA orgs or criticism EA movement tags on the forum, you can find lots of posts like that.
Great. And I guess I'll be taking one more question. So do you have any opinions on the relationship between the EA forum and the AI alignment and Less Wrong forums?
So opinions is a tricky word. I mean, I can talk a little bit about that relationship, which is that the EA forum is a fork of Less Wrong. What that means is we basically copy a lot of their code, but work in some customizations for ourselves. And this is sort of, we entertained a lot of options when we were rebuilding the forum in the course of over the year 2018, and decided that kind of Less Wrong's features and the fact that it was sort of built for an intellectual community that was kind of similar to the EA community in a lot of ways made it really appealing to sort of use what they were using. Less Wrong also has a team of 5 programmers, which is more people than CA has. So a lot of the new features we get come from Less Wrong, which lets us update the forum and make it better quicker. And the alignment forum, I think, is a different fork of Less Wrong. I'm not as familiar with the alignment forum, but I think they're just sort of in a similar position to Less Wrong that we are with respect to Less Wrong. As far as like the relationship in terms of similar values, it's like these are different communities, a lot of shared members, a lot of shared ideas, a lot of shared interests, but I think the conversations on the fora will often be disconnected from each other just because they're pretty different user bases in a lot of cases. Beyond that, I guess I don't have opinions, but that's kind of how the relationship works right now.
Great. So that concludes the Q&A session of this talk. So now I think we're going to move on to the surprise exercise that Aaron has for us.
Yeah, so if you open the document, so if you just look at the event description, you'll see a Google Doc link there. If you open that Google Doc, you'll see a bunch of kind of additional info related to this talk, but the first thing you'll see is a list of writing prompts. And what my idea was for this session was, if you are interested in possibly writing a post for the EA forum, if you decide that writing on the EA forum is not for you, then this part may not be that exciting for you. But if you are potentially interested in writing, I would recommend you look at those writing prompts, maybe open a separate doc and write out some ideas. If those prompts give you ideas for something you might write for the EA forum, try to write out some ideas. This is sort of like a little brainstorming session we're doing. And if you have any ideas that really excite you, put them in the chat. You can also message me directly by sending me let's just say an email to aaron@centerforeffectivealtruism.org, and I'll keep my inbox open. But if you either post in the chat or send me an email, if I see an idea that I think would be interesting to comment on, I will read it out and try to give some live feedback. We'll start with, I think, let's say 5 minutes of quiet brainstorming time, after which I'll start giving feedback on ideas as they come in. And just talk to you about maybe if people have written about a topic similar to yours, or if there are things I'd recommend reading before writing on a topic, or ways to maybe shape a post to make it more useful to the forum. So it's just like a little bit of a live feedback opportunity. But let's start with 5 minutes of quiet brainstorming time. I'll set a timer for 5 minutes now, and I'll let you all know when the timer's up. And please let me know if you have any trouble accessing the document. It should be accessible to everyone, but let me know if you can't see it for whatever reason.
Yeah, it should be on the event description below this video.
That's half the time gone, 2.5 minutes left on the timer. But you don't have to wait for the time to run out. If you have an idea you want to put in the chat, you're welcome to do so whenever you'd like. And I guess I should clarify, probably the best reason to email me rather than posting in status is if you'd like an idea to remain anonymous. If I get an email from someone, I'm not going to read out the name of the person who sent it. I'll just read the idea. And that's the end of the timer. So I'm going to start looking at some of the ideas that people are firing off in chat and or sending me emails now. I think I'll start with Guillermo. Sorry about anybody's name that I mispronounced here. An argument for total utilitarianism, and then some details on that were given. So some thoughts about this. There have been occasional posts on the forum over the years for people arguing about population ethics and sort of which versions of utilitarianism seem to give the best results in different situations. So it may be helpful to sort of enter some search terms into the search bar. They're likely to turn up posts like that and read through some past conversations, just in case people have ideas that you want to reference. And there are, of course, also outside of EA, in the philosophical literature, there's lots and lots of work on this. I'm not really familiar with it as I'm not a philosopher, but this is one of those areas where it's probably helpful to read through a little bit of what's been written in the field, just to kind of see if anybody's had an idea similar to yours, how they expressed it, see whether you have something that's kind of newer to add to the conversation. But you, of course, don't need to make it a post that's on the level of a whole philosophical research paper. It's fine to kind of sketch your idea out, kind of express what you believe is novel about it, and post it, and rely on the people on the forum who are interested in this topic to give their feedback. So I'd just say, like, it seems like an interesting post, the kind of thing the forum is very well suited for. I'd say do whatever amount of research you think is going to be helpful for you before posting, but don't feel like obligated to address every possible objection ahead of time or become a total expert on the subject. It's okay to post something that's, may have some holes in it or is like incomplete or uncertain, because one big purpose of the forum is to get feedback from people who know a lot about your topic. Looking at Tayman's post next, considering running an online chat roundtable and writing up the results as a forum post. That sounds really exciting. I think conversations can just generally lead to interesting places that a single person working by themselves wouldn't necessarily reach. I'd love to see posts like that. Something you might do to make it more valuable, you could ask around, whether it's in EA Facebook groups or on the forum itself, like, what topics could be good ones for an online chat roundtable? What would you be interested in hearing the results of the conversation about? And so maybe getting suggestions from people for topics that could be good follow-ups, so that you can kind of make this into more of a regular post series. There's also a post that from a couple of months ago that's something like, what are the biggest open questions in EA? If you look at the questions page, it's one of the highest karma questions. You'll be able to find it pretty quickly. And this has a bunch of people's suggestions for what they think important unanswered questions in EA are. So you might get some inspiration for roundtable topics there. Something else you could consider, if people in the group give you permission, is just link an audio file. That way people have the chance to, if they want to, download an audio file and listen to it as like while they're walking around doing stuff, as opposed to reading it as a forum post. That's like a potential source of value. But yeah, I'm really excited about that idea. Looking next at Anisha, a summary of reasons and persons. I do think a summary of reasons and persons might have to be a series of posts, since I think that's, what, 1,000 pages long. Very, very detailed, dense book. Yeah, I would like someone to write that as well. And Anisha, if you want to, there's a forum post that's actually linked from the documents. It's actually linked, it's maybe kind of hard to find, but it's just called, what are posts you'd like someone to write? So if you look for that, it's a pretty high karma question post, and you can throw your suggestion in there. and that's a way that at least people who are monitoring new comments in the forum will see it. You're also welcome to like write a new question in the forum. It's like, what are some good summaries of regions and persons? And people can link them, and then maybe you figure out, oh, are there bits of it that are not summarized that you'd like someone to summarize? I imagine that people have tried to write good summaries of it before, and maybe trying to figure out what those summaries are by asking around in the forum, and then figure out what's kind of left, what gaps are left. Could be good. The web, okay, Aaron suggests the web of EA organizations, Saunders Groups, chapters, and line charities. Yeah, that is something that I would love for someone to write a good comprehensive summary of at some point. I think there are people in the community who'd be capable of doing that. Yeah, I think that could be just like a really valuable reference post. Just like, what is open philanthropy? What is their relationship with all these other charities that they fund? Like, what are the differences between like EA university groups and EA city groups and EA country groups? What are all the big charities that work on different cause areas? I think that's a resource that people have tried writing variations of, but there's not one that I can think of that's like comprehensive enough for me to feel confident recommending it. Guillermo, all right. So anyway, Aaron, my summary is I would love to see someone write that. I would in fact pay good money for someone to write that. That might be something we could crowdfund or something, because I maybe have a limited amount of money to spend on commissioning that, and it would be my own money. But it's a great idea, something I'd love to see happen, and would be happy to help you think further through this after the presentation if you want to write to me about it. Guillermo, why doesn't EA try to bring more outreach to high schoolers? There's a couple of really good posts on this. If you just look for high school, you search for that in the search bar, you should find a couple of posts by Cafe Lowe. That's Catherine Lowe's forum username. She's written up some summaries of work that was done, projects that have tried to do EA high school outreach. My short summary is that these projects tend not to have a very big impact, in part because high schoolers just aren't in a great position in their lives to have a lot of time or resources to contribute things yet. They're really busy, and they don't have very much money, and just in general are not super, university groups exist, but before you get to college, it can be really hard to figure out how to build like a high school chapter, for example. This has just been the empirical experience of people who have tried doing this. But Cafe Lowe is the username of the person who's written a couple of really good posts on this.
Sorry to interject, but
yeah.
I suppose from like a psychological and neuroscientific viewpoint, before the frontal lobe fully develops, wouldn't it be better to like try to influence these people?
Maybe. I mean, there are some issues with trying to get younger students to commit to causes that are going to take a lot of their resources. So you could look at it that way too. Is it like, should we be trying to influence people who maybe are still sort of figuring themselves out? I've certainly spoken to people who were in high school who were like who tried to run local groups at their schools, or who were really committed to EA cause areas. And I was happy to try and give them advice that was like appropriate for kind of where they were coming from. But I will note that just like mass outreach to high schoolers has not been very successful historically, and that the posts I referenced kind of share some stories from people who tried to do this. Let's see. So looking to the next idea, I see Ruslan. Again, sorry for pronunciations. Costs of optimization reliability. So I'm not sure I quite understand the idea. I think what you could maybe do is, if you want to write a few more details about what you're thinking and email it to me, I'd be happy to give you feedback afterward. But I'm not sure I could give you good feedback here because I'm not quite sure I can form a good mental model of what this post would be. Let's see. Should members of the EA community be encouraged to engage more online and non-EA communities? Sort of really contextual. I think there are very healthy ways to do this, and ways to do this that risk making a lot of people mad. I've certainly seen examples in Twitter. Maybe a good summary of this is often like a celebrity will reach out and say like, hey, followers, what charities do you suggest? I need to give some money away. It's like a pretty common phenomenon. And I've seen people from EA kind of try to suggest EA cause areas to them. And I've seen really good examples of this where they're like, you might be interested in this. Here's why I think this charity is great. Here's some links to information about them. And I've seen like, oh, obviously you should do this with no further information, which is less good. Basically, I think it's super contextual. I think this could actually be a great question to ask on the forum, as I have a lot of thoughts I would love to write in greater detail once this presentation's over. So I would suggest just asking this question on the forum and seeing what people say about it, because I promise you I will write an answer. Anjay, the 3 cause area framework be damaging. I will say I think the whole idea of there being 3 main cause areas is sort of it feels like an artifact of a past era of EA. I will say it feels like when I think about what EA cause areas are, I just naturally, my brain lands on a lot more things that are outside of these 3 cause areas, if you're thinking about global development, animals, and X-risk. I also think that like cause areas like global development and X-risk are super diverse within them. But if that's a post idea and you're trying to write about why you think it's damaging, I would recommend basically look for examples of times you thought it was damaging. Look for examples of cases where you find, like, maybe here's a promising cause area that doesn't fit in any of these three things, and I think it's neglected. I'd say if you want to write a post about this, it helps to give specific examples and share cases where you think this is damaging, and sort of that'll help strengthen your argument. I do think the general points you make are reasonable, and I'd be interested in hear you kind of go further in explaining those. Okay, looking at Ruth. And I notice we're almost out of time here. I'll try to get to as many people as I can, but I think I'm supposed to just cut off at 8. Can I confirm, Melinda, that we're going to get cut off at 8 exactly?
I'm actually not completely sure, but let's try to keep it under 5 minutes.
All right, well, let's go. So looking at Ruth now. Many EAs want to have a way to spend their spare time. There are many useful outlets for the average person to do that. Yeah, I think volunteering in EA is an underappreciated topic, or at least one that's not been written about often enough. I think you can find people who occasionally will make lists of good EA volunteer opportunities, but again, it's like the web of EA orgs. I don't think there's a great comprehensive resource on this that I feel really comfortable recommending right off the bat. If somebody were to take the time to do that, that's, again, one of those valuable ideas that I think I would be happy to discuss with someone much further. It's the kind of thing that I would be interested in maybe crowdfunding someone to do this, like for money. I think I've mentioned crowdfunding a couple times, even though, as far as I know, no forum post has ever been crowdfunded for. That's kind of one of my pie in the sky ideas for something I'd like to do more of someday. But if you are a person who wants to produce something like this, please write to me, and I would be happy to talk to you further about how you might get resources to do this. I think this is the kind of project maybe that the EA Meta Fund might be interested in funding, for example. Like, I think you could probably get someone to do a grant for you to write this if you can kind of present a case for why you're a good person to do it. That said, you're also welcome to just write a forum post, what are good volunteer opportunities, and see what comes out of it. Aaron Hanlon mentions that an EA wiki would be valuable. There are definitely a lot of people who have made attempts at that. And yeah, I think if you want to be somebody who creates a really good EA wiki, that's again a good opportunity to get a grant for doing that. But so far, EA wiki projects have kind of gotten pretty low uptake after initial bursts of content writing in most cases. Thanks for linking the SHIC posts, Michael. And Danny for encouraging people to reach out to you. All right, and John, looks like the last idea we have here, I should check my email real quick. Oh, wow, a lot of emails have come in. Okay, so I'll get to John and then try to get to some emails. Ideas for promoting EA ideas and values more broadly via art. Great, that sounds like an awesome topic for a post, whether it's a question for how we could do some of this, or if you have some suggestions for particular types of media you think would work well for this. I would love to see somebody write a post about this. But yeah, probably asking it as a question, but maybe with some of your ideas thrown into the question to give people a chance to respond to those as well might be the best format for a post like this. You could look at the EA, I think there's a tag that has the word art in it on the forum. I forget what the exact title is. It has a couple of posts linked under that. It's pretty incomplete because the tagging system so far only covers a few hundred of the highest karma forum posts. But I would love to see a post on that. And looking at my email, we'll see some anonymous ideas to share. The effectiveness of academic research, a post that it's a topic that someone was interested in. How does research focus on specific problems compare with research which is more blue skies? That's a big question. I think I'm sure there have been empirical studies of trying to gauge like the impact in terms of things like citations. As far as like social impact of different kinds of research, I think it's a really big question, and I don't know of anybody who's really tackled it really comprehensively. Good one to ask a question on the forum to see if people know about resources that I might not know about. Looking at another anonymous question here, an equation for quantifying the value of different lives, and a draft equation this person came up with. Yeah, this seems like a great thing to post about on the forum and get feedback on. I think a lot of people have opinions coming from a lot of different fields about the specifics of your idea. But yeah, this looks good. I probably will reply to your email a bit later with some more feedback, but I think that's a promising thing. If you have an idea for how to do quantification on something that's important to EA, posting on the forum is great. Post idea anonymous. Things I learned from, all right, so somebody had basically a job. I won't specify too much about the job, again, trying to keep them anonymous. And learned basically a job where they had a lot of one-on-one conversations with people who had a lot of social power or a lot of money, and they wanted to post about whether that would be interesting to the community. I would love to see a draft of this. I'm so fascinated by this idea. I'm going to write back to this person and tell them that. But I think if you've had interactions with the kinds of people who EA wants to reach out with, and you think you have insight that the community lacks about how to communicate with certain groups of people, that's a really good candidate for forum sharing. It's one of those examples of the forum, the EA community is diverse. It's got lots of people with lots of different backgrounds, lots of wonky life experiences, thousands and thousands of people. And I would love to see more of the life experience of these people end up on the forum. I think I gave some examples in the presentation of that, where if you've had just some experience in your life and you want to share about it, and you think that a lot of people in EA don't know about it, that's a perfect candidate for a post. And I would love to talk to you further about it. And I think that's all the time we have, which is good because my voice is starting to go.
Great. So that concludes the session and our last talk of the conference, actually. We do have another icebreaker left, but I really hope you guys, especially the first timers, had opportunities to explore, learn, laugh, connect, and get excited to continue to build this momentum. As Will said, we hope the ideas of EA will one day become the norm of our society. So thank you for helping to make that happen, and hope you guys are all excited for the future of EA. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.